That guy can,
Yeah. Fuck off.
he can fuck right off.
Right off. 10 times. I think we have our opener.
Hello, and welcome to Middleish, the podcast about moderation in all things. I am Erin Green.
And I am Michael Gray. What's
Good morning.
going on, Erin?
Well, I was going to
Wow.
ask you, do you have enough ice for your glass of whiskey down there, or are you one of the fortunate few in Texas who has not been like caked in by an ice storm?
Yes, so it's been colder here than normal. You know, like our lows have been like mid 30s, high 30s, which is chilly for here, but we have not had any of the ice. Like there's been a couple mornings where we have like a little bit on our windshields.
Oh, okay.
But no, we're not. That's more like Austin, Dallas. We've kind of missed that, thank goodness.
Skirted
It
that.
missed us, yeah.
I was watching the news this morning and watching people like literally chip out of their houses and into their cars. And I've been involved in an ice storm only once in my life when I was over in Portland. But I was picturing you like going out to your tree or something and just chipping some ice off and throwing it in your glass of whiskey and calling it good. I was like, that would actually be pretty convenient. But
Yeah, hey, it's fresh,
Sure.
right? Ice right
Yeah.
off the tree.
I know. So have you watched the series Alone?
No, I have
you
been
heard of it?
told a bunch of times to watch it. Yes, and it seems
Okay.
pretty interesting. I just haven't pulled the trigger.
I've only seen one season that's on Netflix, and
Mhm.
listeners, if you have seen it or haven't, I would say just it's kind of interesting. It's worth checking out if you like reality TV. I personally will only watch reality TV if there's not like interpersonal conflict kind of drama, because I hate that. Like
Mhm.
I won't watch shows where they're like bullying each other or being I don't like it. I like the show itself and the premise of things setting the drama, right? Like the Great
Mhm.
British Baking Show, where like the clock and like all the
That's
things
what I
that
was
go
gonna say.
wrong
Yeah.
when you're baking,
Yeah.
but they're all like each other's cheerleaders. I
I know
love
they
that
help
kind
each
of
other
show.
out. I'm done. Let me help you out.
Totally. I'll hold
Yeah.
this for you while you decorate it. But
Yeah.
on Alone, it's the drama is put into like the survival skills that the people have, the availability of food, what the weather does, how
Mhm.
wild animals interact with these people. And I'm really enjoying it. It's kind of it's like one of those movies that's sort of slow, kind of a slow burn, and then something happens and you're like, whoa, what's gonna
Yeah.
happen next? And so it kind of keeps you just like waiting. And anyway, when I have been watching all of this like ice storm business on the news and I'm watching
Mhm.
Alone at the same time, I'm just like, I have no real sympathy for people that get out in their cars and drive on a skating rink when I'm like, these poor people are like out in the wilderness surviving these kinds of conditions. So anyway,
Yep, I need to check it out. I've heard it's really good.
yeah, it's interesting.
I have been watching it's like a docuseries, Madoff, about Bernie Madoff. It's like a 4-part series.
I watched
It's
it.
Oh, okay. I'm on, I think, the third one. Yeah, it's really good.
Holy
Wild.
crap. Can you believe it
It's like,
happened?
how did he pull this off? Like he
I
almost
have-
got busted so many times and
Well, so
should have so many
yes,
times.
yes. So I'm not
Insane.
gonna like. I mean, there's no
No
real way to
spoilers.
spoil this for
No
anybody.
spoilers.
Because
I don't know if
it's
he gets
already
caught or
happened.
not.
Everything's already played out. But the one thing I will say is the mathematician guy, I can't remember his name, that works for another investment firm that literally he was told by his firm to figure this out. Like, how is Madoff making these kinds of gains with his investments? Figure it out, because we need to match that. And so
I don't
this
think I've got there
mathematician
yet.
gets to work and he cannot, the math doesn't math. It ain't
This
math.
math ain't mathin'.
And so he's interviewed on this documentary. I can't wait till you get to this part, because he is the hero of the whole thing, but the government didn't listen to him. So he literally like sends a package explaining everything and why Madoff is a scam, and
Mm,
still didn't investigate him or catch him.
wow.
It's just remarkable. It's so
Yeah.
crazy. So
It's
anyway,
pretty wild. It's good. I'm really enjoying it.
it's a good one.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Well,
Well, hey, it's February. February,
it is February,
second
and
month
the
of the year, and you know what that means.
Puxatawny
Only
Phil
10
said
more
we're
to go.
getting we're supposed to get like 6 more weeks of winter, apparently,
I know, apparently.
based
Did
on the
you ever,
groundhog.
like, as a kid, think this seems really backwards to me? Like, why, when he sees his shadow, because it's
Yes.
sunny, does that mean spring's not
Yes.
coming? I always
I'm
felt
not a
like,
ki-
I mean,
I'm not a
I
kid
know
anymore.
it's,
I still am confused over it.
yeah, I mean, I know it's not like scientific. I know it's bullshit, right? It's not like
Really?
Santa Claus. Yeah. Uh, but still, even as a kid, just being like, but if it's sunny out, like, what? Maybe spring's here.
I know. I know. I think I
Yeah,
looked
never
up
made
one
sense
time
to
like
me.
the accuracy of Punxsutawney Phil, and I I don't remember if it was
Is
very
he any
accurate
good
or
at
not,
it?
but I don't know.
Or is he
He
just really
still has
shitty
a
at his
job.
job?
It must be a government job, because that's how like people that don't do their jobs are still there. It's really hard to get fired from a government job. Just saying.
Punxsutawney Phil working for the government.
Punxsutawney Phil. So we do have a topic today, friends,
Yeah, and it's
listeners.
not groundhogs.
So if you have been fast forwarding through our BS and catching up and weather talks and favorite binges on Netflix, you
Certainly
can
hope
stop
not.
you can stop fast forwarding now and listen to our episode, which I'm excited about. It's going to be a fun
It's
one.
something that has substance.
It has something that, yeah, we're not just on here to BS our way through an hour of your time.
I mean, a little
Um,
bit, but not
yeah,
entirely. Yeah.
I I will do my best to keep the profanity and yelling to a minimum. Unless you, of course, want me to yell and be profane.
I think you should follow your heart. That's what I think. And so I think, I mean, not exclusively by any means, but I think I tend to get on my soapbox a little bit easier, maybe, or a little more worked up. Not exclusively, because Aaron certainly does too. But I'm really excited to see where Aaron goes with this one, because she is hot.
I put notes in, so Michael and I, will kind of prepare for, if we prepare
Uh,
for a podcast, we'll put it in like a little shared document on Google Drive, and we'll kind of go back and forth with ideas. And this one, our title is Fear Factor, and we are examining the ways that social media in particular, but overall health messaging and fitness diet messaging, invokes fear in people in order to motivate them to
right,
make a different choice, to buy a product, to whatever, get on board
right.
with whatever the influencer is trying
Yeah,
to push.
buy into a dogmatic belief. Yeah,
Yep. And if you've been listening to us for a while, you can already appreciate why that doesn't jive with us. First of all, we don't like using fear as a motivator for people. And we can talk a little bit about that. But then secondly, half of the crap that these people say is not even true. And one of them, I went on a full-on keyboard rant in our little drive, and I don't even, did you just see that this morning?
no, I saw it the other day, but I reread it all again this morning because it was fun.
Yeah, I used some four-letter words, and I think you could feel the ire
A
coming
few.
right out of the screen.
Yeah, it was pretty clear.
So we'll get
So
into
here
that
we go.
discussion.
All right, buckle up. All right, Aaron, take it away.
Well,
I'm
I've
just
been
kidding.
I wanted to start with, we've talked with our friend Brian Fretwell about this a couple times. And maybe if you go back and listen to our episodes with him, you might glean this little piece. But our brains have more energy devoted to identifying threats and then invoking a fear response than they do, identifying positive things and being
Mhm.
calm about things. So I don't remember how much. It's like 3 or 5 times as much energy is devoted toward like identifying a threat. And so I just wanted to kind of premise this with the reason why fear is used by these influencers and salespeople and marketing and all of these different, entities, because it is a very powerful motivator.
Right. Yeah. And I think when we make choices from positions of or places of fear, like we're concerned with like avoiding, right? Like, and not
Yes.
with like, what does my life need to be healthy? I think that's why, like, when people start a health journey, what is the first thing they do? Cut out all the things, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, these are the fearful things. Let me get these out. And there's not a lot, like, you look at a lot of these accounts, they don't really tell you like what to eat. They're like, don't eat that, don't eat that, don't eat that, don't eat that. And it further reinforces, I think, for most of us like already have is like a tricky, I'll be kind about it, a tricky relationship with food, right?
Right.
If not just flat out incredibly wildly unhealthy. And so stuff like this doesn't do anything to help that, even if they were accurate. Like, even if this stuff was accurate, the approach doesn't help like repair that relationship. It just further reinforces that fear is something to be scared of. It's coming for you. Anyone who's manufactured any kind of food just wants to poison you. And there's consequences just like personally, I think, with those things, because we have this really shitty relationship with food, and it just reinforces that that's a good relationship to have with food. That's the way to do it. But also it completely misses like a bigger picture of like availability of foods for, more wealthy areas and poorer areas, for children. And it creates like this morality around food. And it's just, food is either good or it's bad. It's one or the other. There's no
Right.
spectrum, which is complete bullshit. Food is absolutely on a spectrum, a bunch of different spectrums, right? But it creates black and white. You're either doing a good thing or you are not caring all about yourself, eating poison and toxins, and have fun dying. Like, those are the options.
Yes, exactly. Like, okay, if that's how you want to treat your body and you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
listen to me. And
Yeah.
the one thing I'll kind of disagree with you on one point, and that's that some of these influencers are so specific about what you should be doing that
Sure. Some
yes,
of them.
they
Yeah.
invoke fear and
Right.
tell you what not to do more than anything. But the ones who have very specific things about how to eat, how to
Mm-hmm.
live, what to, how to move your body or exercise, or these are all the things you should be doing. You're absolutely right that they place this morality on it. And one of the things about how we process a threat and fear is if we perceive a threat, we will automatically, our nervous system is screaming at us to get back to safety, like get out of the
Mm-hmm.
situation. And if we, I mean, in a very real sense, if you're being, as Brian Fretwell likes to say, if you're being chased by a bear, you would like run to safety. You would get to your, cave or whatever. You back in the caveman days, we would find safety somehow.
Climb a
But
tree,
if you
right?
uh somebody did that on Alone when they encountered a bear. And I was like, isn't that the wrong thing to do? Anyway, long,
I would think
long
so.
story. Anyway, but if you don't know the way back to safety, if you
Mm-hmm.
aren't sure what the safe path is, you are very likely to follow someone who promises the safe path.
Right.
And so what these people do is they set up all of this fear, and then they say, oh, but do this, buy this $6 little, container of yogurt. Look
Mm-hmm.
for the bread that spoils quickly. Look
Right. And
for,
costs $14 a loaf.
buy my shake mix that's like $70
Yeah.
a month for you. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so just so you understand, when you're watching this stuff on social media or even on TV, or if you like hear a sales pitch, that is what is at work on you, is
Mm-hmm.
let's make you afraid. And then, oh, listen to what I have to say. I have the solution for you. It's safe. You can trust me. Follow me to the answer. That's how this
Yeah.
works.
And what I think is, this is the last thing I'll say before we jump into specifics, but what I think is important to like recognize and be aware of is how much of like these accounts are kind of like monkey see, monkey do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you start watching a lot of these, it's like they're all saying the exact same thing, like in really, really similar ways. And I have no proof, but I'm really pretty sure that most of what these people are doing is they're just rehearsing and reciting another video that they heard about, GMOs or gluten, whatever it is, right? And so then they think they're doing a good and noble thing by just not thinking at all and just spewing out the same information. And this gets likes and shares, and that feels really good. And, this nice little dopamine hit for them. But there's a lot of these accounts really quickly. I mean, some of these I think are more informed. I think
Mm-hmm.
they too. I mean, I wouldn't say they know what they're talking about, but they have maybe some base understanding. They've spent enough time like reading bullshit that they kind of understand it. But like a lot of these people, like it's really clear really quick. Like you have no clue what you're saying. You're just saying the words back, but you don't know what any of them mean. You go
Yes.
into the
And you
comments and it's real
sound
quick. It's like,
totally, and you sound authoritative because you use big words and scientific phrases, and if you say it with conviction and confidence, sure, it sounds like you know what you're talking about. But
yeah.
what I love is when other influencers get on there and call people on their bullshit, and they're like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like one of our favorites that I know you and I both really like is Food Science Babe.
Good science, babe. Yeah.
She's so good, and
Fantastic.
she will get on there and just be like, it's clear this person has no idea what they're talking about, and then she'll tell you why. So we
With
do
science.
have, yes, with some facts, those pesky facts that people don't want to listen to
so much.
So we do have some suggestions on followers that or influencers that we like, and we would encourage you to follow if you're looking for facts over fear, which I know is kind of a tagline. We're not trying to like get on, the COVID bandwagon here, but it's true. Like there's been a lot of like fear mongering and, trying to influence people with fear, especially over the last few years. And so I think this is a timely topic.
Sure. So one of the ones, and I can be really brief, maybe this would be a good introduction into specific things, but one of the ones that I think has been so blatant to me lately with like that jumping out with fear, like right from the start, is like, there are wood shavings in your food. Literally, there's pieces of wood in your food.
Or like same ingredients that's in yoga mats.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
It's like, okay, the same ingredients that are in all of our foods are in virtually everything.
Right. If you know anything about chemistry, right. If you know anything about chemistry, like it's really interesting to me that people can twist things into a fearful message when if you really know anything about chemistry, you're like, well, yeah, plastic and margarine might be like a couple molecules apart, but that doesn't mean they are the same thing. They work entirely differently in your body.
At all.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Not even at all. And so like with the wood shavings thing, like to me, that's one I've just seen a lot more recently. And so this is I think a good quick illustration of like how maybe to set up a lot of the rest of this and how it's like, yeah, almost, but not at all. So what cellulose is.
Nice try.
Yeah. Cellulose is just like, it's a building block of plants, right? It's like a non-soluble like fiber basically in plants, and it's in plants. So would 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 have cellulose? Sure. Plant. So yes. Does that mean that all cellulose is wood? No, it does not. So yeah. That's how quickly this stuff gets turned around. Oh, this is something that's in this thing that's undesirable. Cool. We can pull that in and say that's what it is. And it's just nonsense. And it falls apart so quickly with just like, honestly, like just like, I don't know, 10 seconds of like Googling something. It really is that easy. But yeah, anyway. Okay. Let's jump in.
No, I'm totally with you. And that's a that's a great example. And I have several more examples of when people pick apart ingredients in certain things. Oh, you
Mhm.
want to avoid this. Oh, this is terrible for you. And as you alluded to earlier, they use buzzwords like toxins, poison,
Mhm.
inflammation, all of this stuff that of course people start thinking, I don't want to put a toxin in my body. I don't want to inflame my body and lead to all these
Mhm.
chronic diseases. And it doesn't work like that, especially since when they're picking out single ingredients in an entire food,
Mhm.
that single ingredient then is in this like whole food composition that
Right.
has, synergistic chemical interactions. And, it's not like you're just eating pure cellulose in
Right.
in a form that your body can't handle or digest. And so, yeah, if you like sat and like chewed on tree bark, you might get sick. Like there's all kinds of
Yeah.
things that could happen, but
You might
that's
get
not what is
splinters in your
happening
butthole.
here. Right? Yeah, it would hurt coming out the other end. I don't want that. But
Yes. And so I think we will talk a lot about, I will probably say this a lot, but just like the dose makes the poison, right? Like
totally.
anything can be a toxin. Literally, people have died from drinking too much water because they had so
Yeah.
much that it became toxic for them. Anything can be a toxin. And so when people talk about toxins and throw around toxins and chemicals and that kind of stuff, it's usually a good indicator. They don't really know what they're talking about. They're probably poorly informed, speaking confidently, but poorly informed, because
Mm-hmm.
literally anything can be a toxin. So
Yes. So one of the first ones I have on here is from the Food Babe.
the food babe, she's
Her
been
one of
around
her
for a
latest.
long
Oh my
time,
gosh, I wish she would
spreading
go
bullshit.
away. But
Me
yeah,
too.
far reaching influence. And again, she
Mhm.
sounds like she's trustworthy. She knows what she's talking about. She speaks with authority, so people follow her and believe what she has to say. Her latest video on peanut butter, claiming the addition of hydrogenated oils are so bad for health. It's got white sugar, which she emphasizes white sugar is pro-inflammatory. Um, and I'm really kind of confused by why she tends to pick apart. I mean, first of all, peanut butter. Of all of the foods that I encounter people eating, peanut butter is really not the top of my list to start being like, let's watch that peanut butter. That's doing some bad things for your body. It
Yeah,
really doesn't. In my
yeah.
15 years as a dietitian, I cannot remember a single time that I was like, if we were to put a hierarchy kind of on just pure health effects of the different foods you're eating and what could, work for you, I've never
Hmm.
chosen peanut butter as the number one like fear factor food. Um, one of the things
Yeah.
that, yeah, one of the things that drives me crazy about this one is she talks about hydrogenated oils. So, just a quick little background on oils. I know it sounds like hydrogenated oils sounds kind of bad. We've heard different manipulation of fats can be maybe increase our risk of negative health outcomes. The number one of those is trans fats. Everybody remember the trans fats, concerns and everything that came out. I think in like the early 2000s is when it really
Hmm.
erupted. And we finally got legislation that says food companies need to phase out trans fats because we were seeing this very strong correlation with trans fats and chronic disease. Guess what? Hydrogenated oils, fully hydrogenated oils, are not the same as the oils that were put
Right.
into foods containing trans fats. Those are partially hydrogenated oils. Now, I'm not saying that fully hydrogenated oils are, completely risk-free, because there is plenty of literature that says, hey, we need to be focusing on more monounsaturated fatty acids, maybe certain polyunsaturated fatty acids, and diversifying our fat profile, whereas fully hydrogenated oils are considered saturated
Right.
fatty acids. So all I'm saying is she throws that out there in a way that it pings someone to be like, oh yeah, hydrogenated oils. I remember hearing about those. Those cause heart disease and they lead to stroke and health risk and blah, 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 where it's
Right.
not the same as
Right.
trans fatty acids that were so, that are now so heavily regulated in foods. So
Yeah.
that's one thing that
Do
drives me
you think,
crazy.
and I have my own suspicion, I guess, but do you think that's intentional or do you think that's her being misinformed?
Oh,
Just
I think it's
speculation.
totally intentional.
Think it's
I
intentional.
I think part of it is that, and I don't know enough about this person to say these are her beliefs, but
Mhm.
in the food influencer world, when I hear people railing against hydrogenated oils, there's usually a theme here against processed food and food additives, especially if
Mhm.
they sound scary because they've been loosely associated or they sound similar to a component in food that we have found a negative health outcome link to. So hydrogenated oils, partially hydrogenated oils. It's just a very,
Right.
like one word switch, and all of a sudden
Mhm.
it's actually a different compound that you're talking
Right.
about. So it could be that this person is misinformed and truly believes that the couple grams of hydrogenated oils in your peanut butter is leading to like this huge health risk, which I would really like to argue what other lifestyle factors and possible other
Right.
factors are contributing to health risk. But it also could be that this person is just, again, going down the pipeline of less processed, less additives. Let's scare these people into thinking this stuff is so bad for you when it's
Mhm.
just it's not. Like the a little bit of hydrogenated oil in your peanut butter, and as long as you're eating a dietary variety of things, I know families that because they, you know, can't afford certain foods and they rely on peanut butter and their kids will eat
Mhm.
it, they'll get like the Jif and the Skippy and the peanut butters that have some hydrogenated oils added to them.
Right.
Again, never in my 15 years as a dietitian have I looked at that and been like, oh, we need to change this, especially to families that can't afford much else.
Right.
So,
Yeah. That's spectrum. Right.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
she also talks about white sugar. Oh my gosh, it's pro-inflammatory and blah blah blah. Um,
What does she mean by white
what?
sugar?
Well, she means refined, and there is a difference between refined sugar and, say, natural sugars like honey or maple syrup.
Sure.
But I will say that a teaspoon of white sugar and a teaspoon of honey or maple syrup, just speaking from a carbohydrate and sugar physiological response perspective, is essentially the same thing. You might be getting a little bit of like antioxidants, trace minerals, and whatever in the honey and maple syrup, but y'all, it is not enough to make a health difference. So when people, I mean, I firmly believe people should be informed about what's in their food and make decisions that work well for them and that, that consider their long-term health. I'm not saying that, but when you look at the amount of quote
Mhm.
white sugar that's put in something like peanut butter, and then you look at the amount of peanut butter that's eaten in a day or like how it is added to the diet and then the composition of the rest of the diet, like you really have to
Right.
zoom out and look at like the broad picture here.
Right. Well,
So,
and what I mean by what does she mean by white sugar is like I think a lot of times these people aren't informed enough to realize that there are different types of sugars. And I think they look at a nutrition label and they see sugar and they assume that's just like a scoop of, you know, regular
oh
white
yeah,
refined sugar right in. And that's what that means.
yeah.
And it's like there's I don't know how many different types of sugar there are, but there's a lot.
There's 60 names for sugar
Okay.
on food
So
labels.
okay, well there
That's
we
a
go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. So my wonder is if she's just seeing sugar and that's what that is. Any sugar is the bad toxic white sugar that we always talk about,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the last things I'm going to say about this, the same post on peanut butter, she says this peanut butter is not organic, so they contain pesticides. All right. Well,
All right,
genius.
dumbass.
Organic foods contain pesticides too. And I went to there's a website I'm going to link in our show notes, the Organic Materials Review Institute has downloadable PDFs that you can read. You can access these. They're open to the public, that lists all of the different pesticides or various chemicals that can be added to organic foods and still be listed as organic. And guess what? There are 194 pages of acceptable pesticide products for organic crops on their website. That's not including what can be used in livestock raising. That's just organic crops. So when you say like, oh, it's free of pesticides, really? Think you're wrong.
No,
I think you're wrong.
Yeah. It's there's such a health halo around organic and just massive assumptions about what that means. And that's one of the biggest ones, is that if it's organic, it has no pesticides. Yeah, it does. It just has ones that have been labeled as acceptable to call organic. That's all it means. It's still pesticides. They are not inherently any safer or any better. They just fall under this label of organic. That's it. And they get the shit sprayed out of them just like everything else.
Yes, exactly.
Just with just different pesticides. Yeah.
It's just
and
like
it's very
GMOs.
likely that you could have like 2 apples from 2 different orchards, right? Sprayed with the same thing, and one of them labeled organic and one not. I'm not saying that's happening, but I'm saying with logic, that's a possibility.
It's entirely possible, just depending on how that crop is raised and what other factors are involved in the production of it, the processing of it. So the other thing is the whole non-GMO thing. So in another post, she talks about don't poison Santa with these cookies. And she says that like these cookies have non-GMO sugar. And I'm like, well, newsflash, all sugar is non-GMO. I should say all cane sugar. My apologies. Sugar beets tend to have GMO technology applied to them, but guess what? We also have tons of literature on GMOs saying there's nothing to be worried about there from a human health standpoint. I'm not saying that like all GMO technology is favorable to the environment, to sustainability, to, the agricultural microbiome and all this stuff. I'm just saying that from a human health perspective, we currently do not have any reason to be fearful of GMOs. In fact, GMOs have made it possible for us to continue feeding this planet with billions of people on it. So I will move on from Food Babe from there.
Well, let's jump right into GMOs since you kind of pivoted.
Yeah.
Let's do that. So when we talk about GMOs, it's funny because GMOs, it seems like just within the, cultural zeitgeist or whatever, that it's a relatively new thing. It's not. Like virtually, like most modern crops have been modified to a degree, even if that's just like crossbreeding and selective breeding, that kind of stuff, to make like more robust or healthier crops, that kind of thing. Maybe ones that are more drought resistant, whatever. Like people have been doing this forever. So even if we talk about like completely unmodified crops, that's probably not really much of a thing, and probably hasn't been for, I don't know, maybe hundreds of years.
Right.
Like things have been modified. Now, there are different ways to modify things. Sure. So here's what's interesting is there's something called, mutagenesis, where, and I don't know how long this has been going on, but it going on longer than current quote unquote scary versions of GMO have been going on. And mutagenesis is just like blasting the shit out of stuff with radiation and going, let's see what happens. I mean,
sounds safe. It sounds
really, that's pretty much it.
Radiation is natural after all.
Yeah, it comes from the sun, but just like, hey, let's introduce this radiation and let's see what it does. And maybe it does something favorable, maybe it doesn't. Let's, go from there. So that type of genetic modification is not classified under GMO foods, which is really interesting. Now, so this is just blasting something with radiation, virtually impacting like every gene in there, right? Now, what is classified as GMO and quote unquote scary and it has to be labeled, you need to know if you're buying it, is when a food like a specific gene is modified. Like
Right.
one of the, I don't know how many genes foods have, but I'm guessing a lot. One or two of those are modified in a way to like make a crop more drought resistant or whatever, something that is favorable for us. When those are modified, now that has to be labeled. And so it's just wild to me that we are, because of our ignorance, so accepting of just like this total crapshoot of just radiate it and let's see what happens. That's fine. That's cool. But if you intentionally change one gene in a lab, I don't know who you think you are with these
Yeah.
monster foods.
What are you
Yeah,
doing in your Frankenstein lab in there with food,
it's
Frankenfoods?
it's real wild. Okay. And so the last
Yeah.
thing I want to say, I'll say in my little thing here is that, and I just learned this today, but that for a GMO food falls under that classification of GMO food, on average, it takes $130 million and 13 years for that food to be able to be brought to market.
Holy
That
crap.
means this is highly regulated. It is like, I mean, you've got to be real clear on what you're doing. You've got to be able to show that that's exactly and only what's happening. You've got to be able to reproduce these results. I mean, they are so regulated, much more so than just like throw some radiation at it, right? And so when you see a food that's labeled GMO, that's probably been being worked on for 13 years, and people spend a shit ton of money on it just to make it something that can be in your local grocery store.
Yeah,
So
but
it's not
everybody
like,
knows. Though all those scientists are shills for the industry that they're
well,
creating the
that's
GMO
true.
for. All of
That's
them.
true. Yeah, I forgot they're really bad people. That's right.
Yeah. Remember
Yeah.
that everybody in science is out to, make money and further their own interests. I'm just gonna, if you can't tell, I'm being very sarcastic. And I will just say, being in a science-based field and being surrounded by scientists who are my friends, my colleagues, I consider myself a science nerd. I will say that true scientists are always out for the science, and
Mhm.
they intend to raise more questions than they intend to answer with their science. So there are scientists out there that are always like trying to find the solution, for example, with GMO, which stands for genetically modified organism. By the way, it's not an additive. It's not, a chemical. It is literally going into the genetic structure of a plant and splicing or snipping something the same way that we would do to identify a cancer gene in humans and say,
Mhm.
hey, this cancer is really horrible for the survival rate of our species. We're going to see if we can pluck that little gene out and make it less likely for someone to have breast cancer. This is the similar process.
Yeah.
Back to the scientists. The vast majority of scientists are out for questions and answers. They are not out for just furthering an agenda at the expense of human health.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying all. There are some probably pretty shitty humans out there who just want to
Sure.
make money and just want to get their name in a journal and just want the notoriety. But I'm going to stand on a limb here and say the vast majority are
Yeah.
really out for furthering the field of science.
Yeah, and it's funny because like, I mean, one of the most common, at least that I've heard of, I don't know, I haven't done any research on this, just from what I've heard in my own life, like purposes for genetically modifying food is for things like to make it drought resistant. So when
Yes.
farmers have like a very dry year, they don't
Mhm.
lose livelihood and land and homes and people have food to eat. Like it's not a
Just
food
read about
shortage.
papayas. Read about
Like
GMO
what a
technology and
great
papayas.
thing.
Hmm.
What a noble, good thing. I mean, if we're going to use science for something, isn't like people not starving a really good reason? I don't know. Seems pretty great to me,
Yep.
you know?
In fact, I'm gonna just link. I have an article here from Food Insight, which
Mhm.
is I think a really nice, consumer facing resource on these kinds of things, I'm just going to share an article on the GMO papaya because it literally saved the papaya crop on this planet. So anyway.
Really interesting.
Yeah, it is an interesting story, and I think it's one to your point. It illustrates the benefit of having this technology. So, I stand by that. There's nothing to fear. I encourage people to ask questions and to inform themselves, and to. I mean, I'm big on being skeptical about things too. Like continue asking questions and continue learning, but don't just listen to some scary influencer that says, oh, GMO. Like it's so triggering to hear GMO anymore that people just automatically take me back to safety. This is so bad.
Right.
I don't want GMOs.
Well, and I think part of this when we talk about a lot of this stuff is like scientific terms are intimidating, right? Like we don't use them every day. And they're big and they're long and sometimes they're based in Latin. You know what I mean? Like it's just they can be intimidating. And so when we see these things at like genetically modified, like we don't understand it, we don't know what it means. And so I think like you're talking about with like that threat thing is like our kind of natural inclination is like bristle up against it. You know what I mean? It's like when I've seen that post of like the chemical breakdown of a banana, right?
Yes.
Like not knowing it's a banana, like, would you eat this food? And it's all these intimidating words and scientific
that you can't pronounce.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which there's a whole other thing about like, don't eat anything you can't pronounce. Okay, don't eat anything. Because if you break it down, there's a bunch of shit in there you're not gonna be able to pronounce. But like, it seems intimidating because it's like, oh, it's like chemicals and hyphenated stuff and numbered things. And these must all be bad for me because I don't immediately understand them. And the truth is, that's everything you eat.
Yep.
Everything you eat. And so I do think when we see things like, genetically modified or like partially hydrogenated, it's like, whoa. What are these big lab terms? Okay, lab created. Know all I need to know.
Right.
Avoid that.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I have a couple others. I'm tempted just looking at our time. I'm really tempted to leave. So I think I might leave the super ranty one with all of the 4-letter words in it. Maybe we should do a second part of this that specifically addresses the really shitty practice of preying on some of our most vulnerable members of society, including, but not limited to, children, infants, parents, people sick in hospitals, because I have a couple for those, and those will take me longer than we have here today to get through. I don't know. What do you think? Should we do a part 2?
I think we should definitely consider it because I'm like, man, we got so much here and we've got
some other things. I really want to hold on. If you can hear, I'm listening to this TikToker. So how do I turn off the sound on TikTok? It's so obnoxious to me that, okay, I just muted it. So this guy, Dr. Petty Natural Health is his name on TikTok. He has this TikTok talking. First of all, he talks about the garbage that's served on airplanes. That's another buzzword, garbage. It's highly inflammatory. It's junk. It's filled with glyphosate. I mean, oh my God. He makes it sound like you're just digging through a dumpster and pulling out the Roundup jug and cutting it into pieces and chewing on the plastic. It's ridiculous. So he goes on to talk about why there's another TikTok where he talks about why you can't stop eating cheese. And I wanted to share this one because, okay, I freaking love cheese, right? It's like, why can't I stop eating cheese? Oh, because I don't want to.
Because I have no interest in that.
Because I don't want to stop
breathing either. Let's talk about more dumb things.
Yeah, what a masochist thing to think. So he talks about these compounds called casomorphins. And basically it's, if I understand it correctly, your body produces these casomorphins as it digests the casein in the cheese or in the dairy product, and that can then signal the brain in the pleasure response center, which I think we can just say the pleasure response center of the brain is activated from a lot of different things, not just food, but like, snuggling with your kids or your pet, or during sex, or during, any other pleasurable activity that releases, during a good workout, whatever, that releases those neurochemicals in the pleasure center. So it is not bad to get pleasure from food. You are not broken if you get pleasure from food. And you're not addicted.
Such a dumb idea.
Because your brain lights up when you eat chocolate or cheese. Like blah. So the comments, I have to read the comments. So first of all, the very first comment on here is like calling out some of these other experts, like, hey, is this true? What do you think about it? And one of them says, casomorphins don't cross the blood-brain barrier. And spinach also creates a similar compound. So are we addicted to spinach? So that's one of the things. But here's the other. Why did casomorphine sound good, though? Can I get that with chips?
That's the first thing I thought. Are you talking about queso?
Someone else says, I am fully aware that I'm addicted to cheese and I have no plans on getting clean. And then another person says, all I heard was queso.
Yep, that's all I heard too.
Hi, my name is Liz and I'm addicted to cheese. I failed to see the problem here. I am from Wisconsin, so yeah. If eating cheese is wrong, I don't want to be right.
I don't want to be right.
I'm eating cheese as I'm watching this. It's making queso? That's the best news ever. I mean, these comments just had me cracking up. And this is one of the reasons I actually do love the internet, is because you get this gold whenever people, whenever their fear mongering falls flat, the audience shows up and creates this magic. And you're speaking my language. So that's another one that I'm just like, he says something, again, it sounds scientific and there is a kernel of truth there, but then the whole story isn't there, and causing you to feel like, oh, I have to avoid things that are addictive. Well, guess what? There's a lot of things in our lives that we pursue every day in the pursuit of pleasure. That is how humans work. So you're not broken for getting pleasure from food.
No, that's actually an okay thing.
Yeah. In fact, we would starve if we didn't. So
yeah, and it just speaks to like this whole backwards like thought we have around like nutrition. Like we're just such a society that just feels like we have to suffer to like be pursuing the good thing. Like a healthy road forward can't be enjoyable. Right? Like you work out till you puke, no days off, no rest, eating kale and boiled chicken, can't eat anything and it's just like, what are we like? It's just so stupid and backwards. And I could go off on this for a long time, but I won't.
Do it.
But it's just not the case that like we can't enjoy our meals. You can't enjoy what you eat and be healthy. It's ridiculous. I'll leave
There's
it at
another
that.
one.
I had to intentionally stop myself there.
Yeah. Well, you can rant, buddy, because I'm right there with you. There's another one by this influencer called Glucose Goddess, who's been debunked numerous times too. It's a stupid name if you ask me. So there's that. But she talks about
because she probably knows nothing about glucose.
Yeah, so she has to create like a title like goddess to get people to.
I know all things sugar. It's toxic and don't eat it.
So she's all about having a savory breakfast over a sweet one. And I'm kind of like, okay, do you realize that even savory breakfasts can have a boatload of carbs and sugar in them? So it kind of like flies in the face of, I mean, biscuits and gravy, hello, has a ton. So there's this one that I found where she talks about sweet cereal gives us pleasure, but it doesn't give us energy. And I have problems with this statement, first of all, because as we just established, it is important for you to enjoy food. So what I ask you is wrong with getting pleasure from eating. And do you know what energy is? Because energy and calories are the same effing thing.
Does it have a calorie?
Literally.
It's got energy. Yeah, I guessed it. She doesn't know what she's talking about.
I know, so weird. I mean, with a name like Glucose Goddess, you would expect her
Man, you really
to
think
know everything about carbs.
he's a bright one.
When she says at equal calories, a sweet breakfast gives us less energy than a savory one.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's just sit with that for a second. At equal calories, a sweet breakfast gives us less energy than a savory one.
100
I'm
calories
pretty sure.
gives you 100 calories worth of energy.
Yeah, so like
That's how that
100
works.
calories of cereal would give you less energy than 100 calories of like eggs, is what
Eggs,
she's saying.
Right.
But we all just established that calories and energy are the same thing. And so I'm having, yeah.
So I mean,
Bullshit.
yeah, 100%. And I think someone could argue like, may it impact your day differently? Would you be hungry sooner with cereal versus
Exactly.
like, sure, there's a bunch of other things that can go into it, right? Like how satisfied you feel and for how long and what nutrients it brings to your body. That's not what's being said. So yes, sure, if that's your argument, yeah, you're right. And there's a million variables that you could talk about. But she's saying that it's less energy, and that's not how this works at
Exactly.
all.
Yeah.
That
And
math ain't mathin'.
I think the other thing about these fearful messages is they usually lack context entirely. So if I might get up and eat just a straight carbohydrate pre-workout snack or something. I've done that tons of times. Grab a handful of dry cereal or grab, a ripe banana, or I've even been known to eat like a pastry or something. I don't always, advise that, of course, in the context of somebody's day, but I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, that's the worst thing you can put in your body, because actually you need the carbohydrates to, get your body revved up, ready to go. So when she's railing against this, I'm like, well, first of all, some people do not have the luxury or time or resources or money to put together a savory breakfast. I could probably come up with a few off the top of my head that I might, recommend people have. But when eggs are costing like $6 a dozen right now, let's just allow people to maybe have oatmeal or something, and with some raisins in it, and be okay with that too, or cold cereal with some milk and get the protein. And and then she talks about how it spikes your blood glucose after you eat it. Well, most people after they eat will have a higher than their blood glucose is going to go up, and they need to. That's why we have insulin. That's why we have.
Yeah, that's the point.
That's like what your body does. We have mechanisms in place that bring the blood glucose back down. So saying that it spikes after you eat, well, newsflash, that's how bodies work.
Yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. So for people who don't know, like when your food's digested, glucose is led into the bloodstream, blood sugar goes up because there's sugar in there, and your body releases insulin, which says, hey, sugar, let's go to these cells and we'll use you later for energy. That's what's supposed to happen. Your blood sugar is supposed to go up after a meal because that's how insulin stores away energy for later use. That's the whole system.
Now, I will say that and that was a great rendition, by the way.
Thank you. I've been working on it.
The extent to which the blood sugar rises and how quickly it rises does depend on the composition of the meal, and how long it has been since you've eaten, and your body chemistry and your body's ability to clear the blood glucose out of the system, and all of these different things. So I'm not saying, and I don't think you are either, Michael, that you don't need to pay attention to any of that. But what I'm saying is it sounds very scary that your blood sugar is just going to spike. It sounds like your body is responding in an unhealthy way and it's out of control, and you did that to yourself. When really, foods tend to be eaten in combination with other foods too. And so I rarely see people just eat like literally straight sugar out of like the sugar jar. And yeah, that could cause some problems. But if you're putting it with other macronutrients, if you're, having it in the context of, whatever in your day, that can play out very differently with how your blood glucose responds.
Right. And unless you have like, an issue with your pancreas, like you're diabetic or pre-diabetic or something, your body regulates that. It keeps your blood sugar from getting too high for any damaging length of time. So it corrects that and it's all fine. Again, I think back to your point, Aaron, like what this misses and what most of these accounts and claims miss is that context. It's painting with broad strokes, right? Like, oh, it raises your blood sugar. Oh, that's a bad thing. I know that's a bad thing, right?
Right.
Well, no, I mean, it depends on who, like, should I have just like cereal for breakfast as a diabetic and not dose any insulin? No, that would be a bad idea for me, right? Because my body doesn't produce insulin that can combat that. Now, could I have just cereal and dose it with insulin? Sure, that'd be fine. I mean, it would probably be better for me to have at least some milk with it, right? Some protein
Right.
and, that kind of stuff. But could I manage that? Yeah, my body could manage that with the assistance of medication. But there's so much that goes into, like, it's just these broad claims often fall apart really fast when they're applied to the individual because it matters. That matters. The individual matters. That context matters. And so when you see these accounts just making these really just wide sweeping claims for everyone,
Yes.
without knowing that person's history, what medications they're on, what diseases they have, what their lifestyle's like, what their schedules are like even just like what's the word like our heritages is like culturally, like what type of foods we
Yep.
eat, cooking
Yep.
stuff, like a million factors. We don't get to speak generally about this stuff. We just don't, because otherwise we're being stupid, which is what you see here.
Yeah. Lots of stupidity out there
Yeah.
on the interwebs. Who knew?
Interwebs.
Um,
You want to do another one real quick?
yeah, let's talk about some exercise
Okay.
fear bullshit, because there's a fair amount of that out there too. And one of the things that comes to my mind, we talked about this in a previous episode. I don't remember which one, but one of my clients who has been working really hard to control diabetes, has been working hard to just instill healthier habits and, lose some weight, has specific goals in those areas, has been utilizing walking as a main avenue to get healthier, and came across this article and sent it to me and was like, hey, what do you think about this? And it was like, that walk isn't doing you any good or something. Like the headline was like BS. But it plays on that fear response that somebody thinks they're doing something good for their body, but wait a minute. This article is telling me that's bad for my body, or it's not helping. Oh my gosh. So again, we're led back to safety by what's the path. And it says high intensity interval training or climbing stairs or all these other things. And I'm like, but what about the person's joints? They're, if they have a heart condition, if they have access to those kinds of things, like, anyway, it happens in the exercise world too. Yeah, totally.
Like, yeah, it's okay to do exercise you enjoy.
Yeah.
Again, you don't have to hate it to get healthier.
Exactly.
In fact, maybe that's a good place to start. I don't know. Crazy idea. Yeah. The one I see a lot is, or heard a lot, well, there's two, but I'll start with this one, is deadlifting, right? Like, so I'll just say I've known some people who have worked like in the chiropractic field and have heard them claim like deadlifts are bad. I see people all the time that come in and I was deadlifting and I hurt my back and now they're in here seeing me and it's caused all these issues. Okay, well, there's a couple things wrong with that logic. One, just because an event made something noticeable, right? Like something in the body doesn't mean that event is the issue, right?
Yes.
Like it's more likely that like posture sucks, core strength sucks, movement patterns suck, right? There's a bunch of things that go into that. And there's probably been like, it was more like this was the needle on the last straw on a pile of straws, right? On probably like the last decade of like activity. More importantly, like form is never taken into consideration.
No.
It's like, oh, you were deadlifting. Okay, deadlifting's bad. well, how were you deadlifting? How much
Yeah,
were you deadlifting?
exactly.
Like how much past your known capabilities were you deadlifting, right? And then let's take into consideration the whole fact, like, deadlifting doesn't mean a barbell and a bunch of 45s on each side, right? It doesn't mean hundreds of pounds. It means if you like bend over and pick up your bag of groceries to put them on the counter, you should probably deadlift to do that, right? You should do that movement pattern that's going to position your body well, help you use not just your back, but your butt and your hamstrings, kind of like this whole posterior chain, the back side of you, to perform
Yeah.
that movement safely. Like, it's actually a really critical thing for people to do, because otherwise there's a lot you can't do safely, right? You can't grab anything off the ground. You can't maybe tie your shoes. You can't pick stuff up, even small things. And so it's again painting with these broad strokes. Deadlifting's bad. Don't do it. Well, no, actually, there's some pretty freaking strong people that can deadlift a ton of weight very safely, and everyone, unless they physically can't, should be able to deadlift to a degree. They should be able to perform that movement pattern to a degree, so that they can do activities of daily living safely.
Exactly. And I love that you point out, like, that movement should be able to be performed to a degree. You don't have to do it with a 200-pound barbell, people. If you can do it with a PVC pipe, or if you can do it to pick up, like, your dog's toy off the ground or something, that's what we're talking about here. And so when these fitness influencers get on there and they're like, this is the worst thing you could do, stop doing this movement immediately or whatever. I mean, unless it truly has a risk for injury, I think you really need to think critically when you see some of these claims.
Yeah. Yep.
I found one about this. This is a good way. This is like the best way to get a shoulder injury. And it was just talking about, like, different movements, like behind the back lat pull downs, putting the barbell on your back as you're doing like squats or something like that, or as you're doing military press, different things. And this other guy, I'm going to botch his handle on TikTok, but it's half Sayano Julio, I think. It's half SAIYAN and then Julio, JULIO. He's like, just slow your progression and don't be a dumbass. I think that pretty much sums it up. Like, just make sure that you are working with a qualified person who can, if you have any questions about how to do an exercise, find a qualified person, a personal trainer at the gym, a friend that that's a physical therapist, somebody that you trust that knows what they're doing in this realm, and just ask them, can you just watch my form, or can you give me some pointers and make sure you're doing it right? But usually most of these injuries that happen in the weight room, like, people say the same thing about CrossFit. Oh, CrossFit's the devil. Well, I have some reservations around the culture of CrossFit, how these workouts are put together, and maybe the quality of the instructors. But it's not CrossFit that's the problem. It's progressing too quickly. It's using poor form. It's exactly as you described, decades of kind of letting things go to hell on your body and your stabilizing muscles and not really knowing what you're doing, and then going in there and trying to throw around a rope and some friggin' medicine balls, and you screw up your back,
Yeah, it doesn't take the individual into account, which is, I think, just the thread of every single thing we've talked about here. You know what I mean? Is that nutrition, exercise, health, all of this stuff, it happens on such an individual, personal level. And yes, there are general recommendations, for health, things to do, things to avoid, and that kind of stuff. But even those have to be applied to the individual, right? Like nightshades.
Yes.
For most people, yeah, eat them. Great. Good stuff in them. For some people, no, don't eat those. That's going to really cause you some problems, right? Yep. Like, if you have a specific allergy, like I have like a shellfish allergy. Is shrimp great for you? Yeah, eat shrimp. Super great, source for protein.
But is it great for Michael?
No, because I might die. Yeah, so like maybe I shouldn't eat it. And like, we're poking fun at it, but at the same time, that's the kind of thinking we have to apply to this. So when you hear these things, one, like, I think I feel like I'm wrapping up. Are we ready to wrap up?
Yeah,
You want to do
let's
more?
do it.
Okay.
We're gonna do a second episode, y'all, because
Yeah, I think we need to.
we
Yeah.
have like an entire
We haven't
page
touched
of
half
notes
of
that we
it.
didn't
Yeah.
get to. So
Yeah, we haven't got to half the stuff. But I think one, like, take a critical eye and think, okay, is this message, or the way this message is being communicated, is it instilling fear around a thing? And if so, like, let that be red flag number one. Okay. Because I'm not saying that if someone's instilling fear around something, or it makes you feel, oh, like, that's necessarily a bad message, but it's worth pausing and really examining for a second. Because I think typically when people are, have the individual and logic and sense as like their foundation, they don't instill fear very much. Usually this is people who are just, monkey see, monkey do, just spewing shit they heard from somewhere else. So if it feels like it's instilling fear or trying to create fear around an activity, a food, whatever, let that be a red flag. Two, also really think about, but what does this mean for the individual, right? Understand that you are an individual, and we all are. And so broad strokes, even if it's a good recommendation in general for more than 50% of people, well, that doesn't mean it's good for the other, 46%, 17, whatever. And so we have to think in terms of like, okay, but on a practical, individual, personal basis, what does this mean for me? So those are my two thoughts.
Yep. I like it. The last thing I'm going to say is we have a list of people that we personally think debunk some of this stuff. So Food Science Babe, we mentioned her before. She has a really great TikTok and Instagram.
It's excellent.
It's
probably my favorite. She just
very
does such a
good
great job.
Dr. Spencer Nadolski, we've had him on here before. He and his brother Carl Nadolski have a podcast that's really good. They talk about a lot of this stuff, especially when it comes to like pharmaceuticals and treatment for, obesity, endocrine dysfunction, that kind of stuff. Girls Gone Strong, their podcast, by the way, is Docs Who Lift. Girls Gone Strong is another really good one. This is a body positive one. It's about fitness and lifting and eating and just all of the things, and really dismantling some of the messaging that we get that leads us down this fearful kind of path.
Right.
Okay, one of my favorites is Langer Nutrition. She is a dietitian up in Canada, and oh my gosh, she does these prolific rants against fear mongering and misinformation. And I just love it because, and she uses colorful language. She gets pissed. It's
like
actually
red
really,
and blue and turquoise.
It's really, yeah, all the colors. It's really satisfying to watch her tear down some of this stuff too, because she's just like, how do you sleep at night? I mean, she just gets so mad. I really like some other positive, like food positivity and food freedom ones are the Hungry Clementine, Find Food Freedom, the Nutrition Tea. These are all really good ones. Happy, Strong, Healthy RD. A couple really good like misinformation dismantlers would be Simon Hill. He's great. The Plant Slant is another one that I've seen on TikTok that's really good. And then Danny Mantranga, who has a really good Instagram account that goes through like exercise, movement, and just proper lifting in the gym and that kind of stuff. So that is my list of positive follows. And
we will put those in the show notes.
We will. Yep.
I say we. It's not going to be me. It's going to be
I'll do it. So real quick,
All
in the mundane.
Yeah, I got one.
Go for it.
So last week, for the whole week, my parents were here. And so visiting from Oregon, and girls were in school. So there was a lot of just like kind of time during the day where they were just kind of hanging out, and I was working, but trying to go be with them and, that kind of stuff. And so it wasn't a mundane experience. And then like them being here is an everyday kind of occurrence, but I really enjoyed several moments. So I guess it's a bunch of moments, but just during the day where I would like just go sit at the dining room table where they were maybe playing cards or reading a book or something, and just like sit and hang out. And maybe we wouldn't talk. Maybe I just sit and have my coffee while they were doing whatever they were doing, or sit in the living room while they were, you know, playing Sudoku or whatever, just entertaining themselves, but just being and not really doing anything with my parents. It was really nice. It was really meaningful just to have them here and have moments where it was just like, yeah, this is just, me at home by myself, my normal day working with a quiet house, and my parents are here, and we'll stop and play cards or go for a walk together. And it was just really nice. It was really fun.
I love that. There's something
Yeah.
really nice and comforting about having the option to just, briefly engage with another human,
Mm-hmm.
or like just have
Yeah.
kind of that company,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're just sitting in silence together for hours,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
great. So mine is a couple weeks ago, we had a pretty significant snowstorm here in Boise. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just like the commute was crazy. There were crashes everywhere. And it was, you're kind of driving with a little more caution and kind of taking things slowly and being a little bit more vigilant. And I was driving down my street to turn into my driveway, and I see this I'm assuming dad with his young son near the school bus stop, a couple blocks away, and they were just like standing out in the snow catching snowflakes on their tongue, like both of them just like on the sidewalk at the bus stop, just like with their tongues hanging out looking up at the sky, catching snowflakes. And it was this great little image. When you're driving in crappy snowy weather, you tend to be like, you're very focused on the other drivers,
Mm-hmm.
what's my following space in front of me, and
Right.
who's turning here, and do I, all this stuff. And then you see this scene of like these people that are totally enjoying the snowfall and having this like, dad
Yes.
and son moment. It's really cute. And so that was mine a couple weeks ago.
Love it. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right.
So
Well,
thank you.
thank you, everyone.
This was a bit longer than usual, but we have more. So
Yeah,
thank you
we'll
for
do a
bearing with
follow-up.
us.
We don't know when and what that will look like, but it will happen because, yeah, literally, like we didn't get through half of the things we want to talk about. So,
Yeah, we'll
yeah.
we'll do another one.
So don't be
Um,
scared. Don't operate out of fear. That doesn't mean there aren't things to avoid and that kind of stuff, but don't have fear be your reason for doing that, because that's
yep.
usually a pretty yucky road to go down.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, y'all.